there was anything I couldn't do, so I didn't know any better.
It's amazing though what the impact that has on.
Oh,
really.
absolutely.
It does frame what your limitations are. What you limit yourself to.
Yeah.
Really.
And if you didn't have any limitations, we did some good work in the 90s.
Yeah.
That's where I was introduced to the Rural Center, went through our leadership development program.
And then you became a county commissioner. So, we were talking about that a little bit earlier before we started filming. Everybody should do it at least once, maybe one term is enough, maybe
absolutely.
half a term.
I don't regret anything about it. And the job I have now, when I go out and meet with a community or meet with the county, and when you can talk about, okay, I know what it's like to sit on that side of the table.
Sure.
And, I served a term as county commissioner. That resonates with folks. Like, okay, he does know how it works in a rural, small place.
Well, particularly out west, a little bit I know, have some familiarity with a little bit with Ashe County, a little bit with Avery County, with Tiger County, and so on and so forth. And there really aren't but about 6 or 7 families in most of those counties that really constitute the vast majority of the population. I know that sounds a little cliche, but there's a lot of truth to it.
You could pick a half dozen names and probably get 15-20% of the population real easy.
That's exactly right.
Yeah.
So anyway,
and then you start doing family trees, and
I understand. My folks are from down in Martin County and from down in Duplin County before we came here. So it gets as I say, kind of incestuous in a hurry if you're not careful, right? Not really, but the joke is understood.
There were a few families that settled, all these communities originally, and most everybody that's there that has been there over generations can trace back to one of those families.
Sure. Well, tell me, what is exactly the mission of the Rural Center?
Well, the mission of the Rural Center really is to improve the quality of life for people who live in rural North Carolina and the communities they call home.
Right.
So we're an economic development focused organization. We're focused on how do we build a stronger economy.
Right.
And believe that stronger economy leads to a higher quality of life. And how do we equip communities with the tools they need to try to build stronger places.
And so what does that look like in practice? Because look, a lot of North Carolina is rural. Now, we live in East North Carolina, we consider this rural, but the far west, and even some of the central Piedmont, the southern side, a little bit on the north side.
Yeah.
I mean, if you're not on the I-85 crescent, or if you're not on 95 or 40, you're probably in a rural area.
Pretty rural, yeah. We serve 80 of the 100 counties in terms of how we define rural. Okay. So it's about 80% of the landmass of the state of North Carolina.
Right.
So and people don't we have changed. The Rural Center's been around for 34 years. We've seen tremendous change in this state over 34 years, but we have the second largest rural population in the country.
Is that right?
Only Texas has more rural people than North Carolina.
Wow.
We have the highest, we're second only to Pennsylvania in terms of the number of small towns we have with less than 10,000 people.
Okay.
So, we describe ourselves as persistently rural. And even as we've seen the urban areas grow and develop, we're different from a lot of other states in that our urban base is spread throughout the state more. And that makes a real difference economically for those rural places. We have 26 of the 80 counties that we serve that are part of metropolitan statistical areas.
Sure.
So those 26 rural counties really are from a workforce standpoint, from the way the economy really works and the way the mechanics of all that works, they're really integrated into more of that metropolitan economy. And those 26 counties are pretty healthy when you look at their local economies.
Right. So what are you seeing the thing that is making the most difference with folks in terms of changing that quality of life? I know it's about jobs. I know it's about quality jobs.
Yeah.
But what are you seeing, in your experience of doing it on a day-to-day basis?
We see rural communities. Of course, the pandemic changes the equation for all of us in a lot of ways, but certainly leading up to the pandemic, we see we were beginning to see some rural communities that were really beginning to thrive and really beginning to move in positive directions. And I do think if you look at what are the characteristics of those places, there are some common denominators.
What are they? 'Cause I'm fascinated. I mean, I can name a couple of my.
Yeah,
Edenton looks like it's prospering.
Those communities that really take stock of their local assets,
Okay.
they understand what's unique about them, what makes them different from the town next door, the county next door, or someplace on the other side of the state. And they really work on developing those local assets, understanding them, developing them. Edenton's a great example.
Sure.
The mill project they did there, and now we've got a mill project in Rocky Mount.
That's right.
that is, and
What are they like?
when
West
I think
Jefferson
about
too? You look at the
West
frescoes.
Jefferson, I grew up.
Sure.
Got for first 30 years of my life, I got a haircut, and that's where I went to get my haircut, and where I went to the dentist, and that town is more vibrant than it's ever been in my lifetime.
Well, those are just the two that kind of pop in my head.
Yeah.
When you're saying, okay, know what they own,
Yeah.
and what they're selling, basically.
Yeah.
But anyway, I'm sorry. I keep interrupting you, but I can't help it.
And for West Jefferson, it's really, it is that outdoor experience. It's the New River, it's the Blue Ridge Parkway, it's the mountains, it's all of that. It's also proximity to Boone, proximity to Appalachian State University.
Right.
Which is a real, as a public university, is still an economic driver in that region in terms of jobs. Yeah.
Right. I remember I first went up that neck of the woods, stayed with any kind of consistency probably 35 years ago.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's probably right. And Appalachian State, gosh, I mean, it was a sleepy little town.
Yeah.
Flash forward 30 years, the impact that university's had on Boone is unbelievable. It really is.
Yeah. And my dad went to Appalachian State Teachers College.
Yeah, right.
Graduated in '59. And it was a sleepy small town at that point, and a fairly small college.
Right.
That trained a high percentage of our public school teachers.
That's right.
In this state, and particularly in that region.
Right.
But flash forward to today, and you look at how that university has developed and how it has grown, and the economic impact that it has just in its own right.
So I derailed your thought a little bit. I'm sorry about that. You were saying common denominators of these successful small towns.
Understanding your assets, building on those assets, really working on building a place and being very deliberate about that. So I think when people are deciding to invest in a community or to live in a community, there's certain things they're going to be looking at. They're going to be looking at, and certainly the pandemic era has taught us that, is there broadband available? And other types of infrastructure.
Right.
Proximity to a metropolitan area will make a big difference. That's one of the reasons where, we're pretty bullish on Rocky Mount. Just given your proximity and where you're located in the state, there's going to be a lot of opportunities headed this way.
I think we're seeing a lot of it already, and I'm excited. But
healthcare delivery system, incredibly important, and people are going to invest. They're going to move. They're going to live. They're going to stay where there's strong healthcare delivery systems, there's good infrastructure, there's good broadband, there's a good local school system.
Sure. And that school system, that's kind of a hard thing to deal with, particularly in rural areas where you have an aging population. So you have a lot of, we start looking at median age of population. I know at least down east, and I know some of the far western counties, it's just climbing.
It's absolutely true of rural as a whole. We are an older population. We skew older than the average for the state. And that's one of the things that's unique about us. We also see this growing Latino community. And the thing that is very noticeable about the rural population is that we're older at the higher age levels. But at the younger age levels, that's where you see a really high percentage of Latino people young people in in those younger age demographics.
Well, I guess that makes some sense. If you've got if you need a workforce,
younger family.
I got an aging population. I need a workforce. The children of the area have moved off. That leaves a vacuum that new folks would want to come in and try to fill.
Yeah.
So where have you seen success in the public schools, kind of recreating themselves in rural areas?
Yeah,
Because that's a huge
it is.
driver
It
in so many
is.
ways.
I think the most innovative and exciting thing that we've seen, and not too long ago, we visited all 80 of the counties we served and spent
Wow.
very intentional time in each of those 80 counties. And one of the real successes we saw that is a common denominator across many of those counties, it was early college,
Right.
was students in high school beginning to take college level courses,
Sure.
usually with their community college. It's a very different pathway for a high school student.
Right.
But to see high school students graduating with both a high school degree and an associate's degree from the community college is pretty interesting, pretty exciting.
Sure.
And at no cost to the parents. I mean, this is a great value.
Well, it is a great value, and you raise a good point, and also many of those associate level degrees, which is what you end up with, can prepare you for trades. I mean, you can come out to be a nurse
Yeah.
after 2 years. You can work as a lineman, and
Yeah.
you can work as many things. You come out with a trade, college education plus a trade. You're able to participate in the new economy, we'll call it, and or you go off and pursue the other 40
Right.
years of your
Yeah.
education if that's what you choose to do.
I do think we have a challenge in particularly reaching older adults who have children or have grandchildren who had a very negative experience with our manufacturing downturn
Right.
really throughout the
NAFTA.
first 2 decades
That's right.
of the 21st century. We shed 350,000 jobs, and there's not a town in North Carolina that was not incredibly affected by that, and some
Right.
still lasting effects of that job loss. And I think that leads to one of our challenges is to really let parents better understand, and we need to do a better job of helping them understand what the local job opportunities really are. We've got some sectors that have great employment potential in the years to come, and a lot of those jobs are going to be based close to home, wherever home is.
Right.
In the health sector, in the manufacturing sector has changed. It's greatly diminished, but it's really stabilized.
Right.
These are, there is no better paying sector in the economy than manufacturing. And we've seen a real stabilization there. So fewer jobs, but really high quality jobs.
Right.
You mentioned linemen,
Right.
the electrical infrastructure of the country's got to be renewed and rebuilt, and great career opportunities.
Well, not only that, North Carolina is a growth state. I mean, I think I saw is ninth in the state in terms of in the country in terms of population, and I think expected to move to sixth in the next 2 decades or
That's
something
right.
such as
That's
that.
right, yeah.
So, I mean, that's just growth. That creates opportunity if you're in a position to be able to take advantage of it. So, what do you see that growth? I mean, conventional wisdom would seem to suggest that that's going to go to an urban area and it's going to build out. But in a post-COVID world, I mean, what are you kind of saying? What are your tea leaves suggesting to you that we're seeing greater urban growth, we're seeing some rural growth, and what do you think that might look like?
Well, we're definitely going to see urban growth. I don't think there's
Right.
any question about that. And it's projected, for example, the Triangle area, Raleigh, Durham, Chapel Hill, going to add 2 million people to the region in the next 20 years.
Sure.
Rocky Mount's going to know that.
Oh,
and
no.
It's
We're
going to
starting to feel some of that
that
now.
and going to benefit from that.
Right.
But there are some rural places in the state that are going to, I think, do extremely well. And I think those places are characterized by strong leadership locally, focused on building very deliberately a community that people want to be in.
Right.
And we see examples of that around the state. But they're thinking about their workforce needs. They're investing in their local school system. They have a healthcare delivery system that can take care of the needs of a growing population. What really troubles me, though, is as you look at the state and we look at health outcomes, we look at poverty rates and poverty levels, I think a common perception about rural is that we're losing, everybody's leaving, and we hear occasionally people joke about, okay, last one out, turn out the lights.
Sure.
And, they'll never be the last one out
That's
because, these communities are home to people and always will be. But when we think about population loss, it really is it's really concentrated in about 12 counties.
Okay.
We have 43 counties that have lost population since 2010, but it's really concentrated in about a dozen counties.
And I know a fair number of those are in the northeastern part of the county, and part of the state.
Northeastern part of the state, Sand Hills part of the state.
Right.
There's a
Okay,
few
yeah,
a few in the west.
Sure.
Yeah, along the South Carolina border.
Okay.
Yeah, those are areas that I think at a state level we need to be very conscious of. They cannot recover alone.
Right.
And it's going to take a focused effort to really, and a concentrated effort. And it makes a lot of sense to take a regional approach where those counties are clustered to really try to work on them as a region rather than just, county by county, one at a time.
Well, let's talk about that because, I believe that a large part of the address of the challenge for at least the northeastern counties will be the new interstate. I believe we're at 87. Right.
Yeah.
Connecting really Rocky Mountain to Norfolk.
Yeah. Incredibly important connector.
It's just incredibly connected. For us, our intermodal, in terms of our local economy, it makes Norfolk now roughly an hour's drive versus 2 hours.
Yeah.
And that just, anytime you have, it's just like your circular system. Anytime there's blood, anytime there's traffic, things will begin to thrive. But what do you do if you're in the south, southern Pines area? That's probably not a good example. They're probably doing fine, but probably Asheboro, Randolph County, those areas, and even some of the western counties that you were talking about.
They have another important, real strategic connector from a transportation point of view, and that's the completion of 74 from Charlotte to Wilmington.
That's right. Sure.
And that will make a huge difference. Shortening the time to the coast goes through some of the poorest rural counties in the state. So a project like, the interstate quality 4-lane will make a big economic difference to that region.
Okay, so I'm certainly bullish in Rocky Mountain. I'm from here, love it. So what would you advise us to do? It feels like we have a lot of things that are working toward us. Certainly we've got I-87 under development. It may take a long time, but it'll happen.
Yeah.
We've got an intermodal, probably gets accelerated because of those types of reasons. Feels like we have at least an identity as a community. What would you suggest that we really focus our time and effort on to give us the best opportunity to capture the most potential that we can?
Yeah, well, I think a lot of what I've seen happening in Rocky Mount is really good. The mill redevelopment project, you've got good bones in this community. You got a lot to work with, and I think that it makes sense to invest your time in bringing back some of those places. People are going to be coming here. It'll take some time, but it is inevitable, I think. I think thinking about, the strength of your community college, the importance of the community college as really an anchor institution and a driver of the regional economy is an important factor. Your healthcare delivery system, you've got...
We've got two great systems, and the UNC, Nash, and with Vidant over in Tarboro, they both do a great job for both counties that comprise Rocky Mountain.
And, Vidant is the largest employer east of I-95.
I don't think I knew that.
Yeah, they're bigger than Walmart if you're east of I-95.
It's kind of a big deal.
That is saying something. There's career opportunities, job opportunities. It's a great place to focus some energy around that.
So what are some of the fun projects you guys are working on right now that you can talk about? I know a lot what you do economic development wise. You don't really want to share until it's come out, but tell me some of the funner, more interesting items that you guys are playing with right now.
The best thing we get to do is really invest in the development of leaders, of really helping people who are active in their community, they're engaged in their community. How can we give them the tools and resources to be as more successful in their local community.
Right.
And we do a statewide Rural Economic Development Institute. I went through that program back in the 90s. It's the best thing that ever happened to me. And I think what I learned back then is still what people that come to the program today learn, and that is they are part of a bigger picture, that they are not alone rowing their boat, that there's a lot of people that are working on exactly the same things they're working on. And I think just knowing that you're not in a smaller community, in a rural place, and you're not disconnected, and building that network, building that sense of connection, we see a lot of those leaders take off when they kind of discover that network and are able to tap into it and look at best practices in other communities. I've never seen an idea that's not worth stealing. You know, if it's 100%. Capable of replication, we do spend too much time reinventing the wheel a lot of the times in rural communities. And through the conversations we have and the what we expose the participants in our leadership programs to, is trying to really tap into that and help them tap into resources that they wouldn't be aware of otherwise. And it's really rewarding to watch them take off and watch them see what happens to them over time.
Well,
we've had leadership graduates that have made their way to General Assembly and to local office and other capacities, and it's very rewarding to see that happen.
Well, sure. I mean, it is awful easy to begin to feel like you're isolated. You're an island unto yourself, and the reality is something different.
Yeah.
So one of the things you brought up earlier that I think is absolutely critical, but I think we often don't do a good job of it, is how do you develop this notion of regionalism? I mean, the reality is, if Rocky Mount prospers, so will our neighbors.
That's right.
Will prosper.
That's exactly right.
Wilson will prosper. Well, Raleigh's doing just fine on their own, but you have to go to Nashville and so on and so forth. But then oftentimes we get caught up in this notion that there's a finite pie, and I need 100% of it.
Yeah.
Instead of how do I collaborate, grow the pie, and whatever my percentage is becomes greater and greater and greater as the total pie grows.
Yeah.
So I've seen that in many, not just call it politics, but in many ways. So how do you get to that place where regionalism becomes a real thought, almost a lens in which you're viewing the world with?
Well, what we're doing is we very much see regional collaboration as more important than it's ever been to rural communities. As resources are more stretched, it's important that we be efficient about that. And so one of the most productive things we've done recently is join a partnership with the Golden Leaf Foundation.
Sure.
They have a community development grants program. And they operate that grants program by going to different regions of the state and making available grant dollars for local projects within that region. We come along and we do a training component, and we coach, and we help those communities think about, okay, we all have identified this need from a workforce point of view, or this need from a healthcare, health delivery point of view. How do we, and we've got 5 communities sitting here that have all identified this as a major need in their community. Well, how do you work together to achieve it? And by working together, you achieve a bigger impact than you would achieve each of you trying to do it separately and individually in five different times. And we've seen that lead to greater, to Golden Leaf actually getting more regional applications.
Okay.
We've had participants in that process say that it's the first time, I've had economic developers tell me, it's the first time I've ever seen these 4 superintendents from 4 different school systems sit down and work on this problem together. And oftentimes it's just the doing it that helps them all see and understand how much greater impact they could have.
And of course,
if they work
packaging those
together.
programs and incentivizes people to get together too.
It
So,
does, so there, that grant availability helps to
Right.
bring them to the table.
Right.
It helps to open the minds a little bit. We certainly take advantage of that.
Sure.
But I think we've seen the benefit of that. But it's hard work, and I think there's a couple of tricks to it. The regional collaboration that happens has to make sense to the people on the ground. We don't need this. The state, I don't think, or anybody can come in from the outside and mandate, you 3 counties do this together. It's got to make sense to the people on the ground. It needs to be natural. It needs to occur within what are natural economic regions. Communities relate to each other in certain ways, and it needs to make sense to the people on the ground that live there in order for regional collaboration to really, I think, have a lasting effect.
So where do you see one of the more successful examples of that? Within
I'll tell you a region that I think is very good at, is better than most, is southwestern North Carolina.
Okay.
There are 7 counties that are west of Asheville.
Okay.
So a
Yep.
lot of people think, we've probably got some folks that think
Cherokee,
Statesville is the
Macon,
far west. And the people that literally live in the far west will laugh at you.
Sure.
But there's 7 counties out there. They're very rural. They've got a few kind of anchor big things that are there. Western Carolina sits in the middle of those 7 counties. There's 3 community colleges that are out there.
Sure.
But they're very, in a lot of ways, more isolated from the rest of the state than any other region is. They're closer. I mean, they're a 2-hour drive. They can hop in the car and go to Atlanta and watch
I got a brother-in-law
watch a baseball game.
I got a brother-in-law who's from Franklin, and what he'll tell you is, they live closer to, was it 7 state capitals? They
Exactly.
do, Raleigh.
That's exactly
And
right.
Atlanta it's almost local market for
Yeah.
them.
And so that's one reason
But
why.
they've done well.
They have. And I think one reason why is they've had to. Because of that isolation, that they have needed to work together. And so they've done it they've had more practice at it than a lot of other places.
Sure.
So I would point to them as a great example.
Born out of necessity. And so maybe I'll reach out to them and see what the magic is.
Yeah.
Well, look, I want to thank you so much for coming on, talking with us today, and your insights. And you're always welcome in Rocky Mountain. Anything we can do to support you and your cause, your mission, certainly want to try to make that happen.
Well, thank you. Appreciate that. And I want to congratulate you on the positive things that are happening in Rocky Mountain in this community. And thank you for your leadership.
Well, thank you. I would love to take credit for all of that, but the reality is that it's taken many, many hands, many years to work through it. We're somewhat of we'll call it a 10-year overnight success.
Every overnight success I've ever known about took at least 10 years.
Exactly right. Hi, this is Mayor Sandy Roberson. I'd like to take a moment to thank the sponsors of the Mayor's Brief: Tharrington's Auto Works and Collision Center, Rocky Mount Radiator, and Davenport Auto Park. I am grateful to each of them for their support of this program.